a relationship business. It doesn't matter which part of the business you're in. It doesn't matter if you're in a crime lab or a crime scene unit or an evidence vault or anybody within any forensic discipline. We love to think that it's science and law, but it's not. Working in a place with other humanoids is about relationships. And it doesn't matter how great we are technically with our forensic processes. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's the people that will actually drive and decide what the culture is.
Hey there, my name's Ashley Church.
And I'm Erin West.
We were once newly promoted crime scene and latent print supervisors on mutual struggle buses as we both simultaneously tried to navigate through the challenges within our forensic units.
Now we run a business where we create tools and resources that we wish we had had to make these transitions easier. We like to talk about the experiences we've had in the forensic field, the good, the bad, and the ugly, in the hopes to create awareness around these issues and move the needle forward to create positive change in the forensic community.
So if you're a forensic professional, regardless of your years of experience, who's not afraid to dive into real, raw, and sometimes uncomfortable topics, you're in the right place.
This is the Forensics Unfiltered podcast.
We've got another guest interview from our virtual summit for you. Last September, we hosted a free 4-day event titled Forensic Supervisor Success Summit, designed to help you thrive in a forensic supervisory position by setting goals, optimizing resources and skills, and getting organized. 768 registrants from 38 states and 14 countries were able to learn from 28 speakers and listen to 32 presentations. It was so wildly successful that we plan on hosting another summit this year. But while we're preparing for the big event, we wanted to give you something to listen to while you wait. So every month this summer, we'll be featuring a presentation from the 2022 Forensic Supervisor Success Summit. On this bonus episode, we'll be kicking things off with a guest interview with Shawn Henderson, titled Creating an Outstanding Unit Culture. Shawn established Evidence Management Institute in partnership with Tracker Products. Evidence Management Institute offers training classes, online certifications, as well as auditing and consulting services. And if you love this episode, we know you'll love the other presentations too. The presentations featured on Forensics Unfiltered make up only 15% of the entire summit. You can get instant access to replays for all 32 presentations in the All Access Pass on gapscience.teachable.com. We'll include all of the links in the show notes, but again, you can go to gapscience.teachable.com and click on the All Access Pass. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy. Hi guys, my name's Erin West. I'm with Gap Science, and today I have Mr. Shawn Henderson here from the Evidence Management Institute. We're very excited to chat with Shawn today. But before we dive into our topic, where we're going to be talking all about unit culture and building a good unit culture, I'd love for Shawn to take a moment to tell us a little bit about his background and introduce himself.
All right. Hello, Erin. Thanks for having me. I'm Shawn Henderson. I'm the executive director at the Evidence Management Institute. And I've been doing this for about 5 years. We do training and consulting. I primarily kind of work with law enforcement agents. And my little niche of the world is the evidence vault. But I'm a retired police officer. I ran the crime scene unit for our agency for a few years and our property evidence unit. I'm also a recovering English teacher, a former middle school assistant principal. But right now, I mean, I really feel like my main job is change agent. That's if I were to summarize my title into 2 words, that would be it. Our mission for our little part of the world is to change the culture of evidence management throughout law enforcement, and not just for law enforcement agencies, but for all the stakeholders in the justice system. So that's kind of what keeps us going, and that's what I do.
That's great. I love it. And I recently adopted the evidence unit,
and never worked in an evidence unit before. My whole background is in forensics, and I have found that they are certainly a sadly neglected breed. They're a very vital,
It really is, yeah.
very vital part of the agency, but definitely a neglected unit for sure.
Yeah, when people ask me what I do, I usually get kind of blank stares. Everyone watches crime scene shows and police shows, and I tell them that this is not that. This ain't the sexiest part of law enforcement, but without this, the justice system fails entirely.
Oh my gosh,
so,
agreed.
So they're not going to make a movie about what we do, that's good, because the movie would be, if it's done right, very boring. This should be a very methodical, meticulous process that nobody really needs to see. Doesn't mean it's not important.
Agreed. I completely agree with that. So when you first adopt a unit, when you first take on a unit, whether you're a new supervisor, we have some people here that are brand new supervisors. We have some people attending that are very seasoned supervisors. What kind of things can they look for that might indicate the kind of culture that's already present in their unit?
Yeah, I think when you walk in the room, culture is one of those things that just confronts you immediately, if you're paying attention at all. And I think sometimes it's actually a little bit difficult to pay attention when you walk in the room, especially when you're taking over a unit and you're supposed to be the center spoke, or the hub, I guess. You're responsible for so much, so we tend to overlook a lot, and we tend to just kind of run in there and fill our areas of ignorance with just, you overlook a lot. So I think the first thing that you can do is just sit down and pay attention. Look around the room, look at the people on your team, and read them. Read the environment. You can tell a lot about the culture of any particular unit. It doesn't matter if it's an evidence vault or a crime scene unit or a forensic lab. Just look around the room and read the faces. I think that's probably the best place to start. We often, especially as a leader in transition, you come in with a whole slate of assumptions, and normally or typically those assumptions are wrong. That's what happened to me when I took over our evidence unit and our crime scene unit. I was a knuckle-dragging street cop, and I knew nothing about running an evidence unit or running a crime scene unit. My experience was street, and I was good at it. So when I transitioned into a unit and I was not familiar with that world at all, I had to pause, just take a beat, and start talking to people. One of the things I will say, it probably in this presentation like a broken record, this is a relationship business. It doesn't matter which part of the business you're in. It doesn't matter if you're in a crime lab or a crime scene unit or an evidence vault or anybody within any forensic discipline. We love to think that it's science and law, but it's not. Working in a place with other humanoids is about relationships. And it doesn't matter how great we are technically with our forensic processes. We might be ASCLD certified. ASCLD's still a thing, right?
Sure. ASCLD or ISO.
Is that what
ANAB.
Okay, well, good. I just want to make sure I'm using the right language, because sometimes I don't. Or in law enforcement, you might be a high-speed, low-drag law enforcement agency. It doesn't matter. It's the people that will actually drive and decide what the culture is. So that's really the first step. You can look around and see how things are resourced. You can look around and take visual cues from the environment around you. Some of those might be right, some of them might be wrong, but ultimately it's paying attention to the people that you're working with and around.
That's so true. I love that. I think many of us, when we step into that new role, we become very task focused and start working on all the projects and the tasks that have to be completed, and don't always put that much time or energy into the people. So
absolutely. And I think for me, one of the things that I try to listen for when I'm trying to assess culture, because what I do now as a consultant is I walk in and I have the benefit of, I get to walk in and I get to leave, so I can pay attention to things that aren't tasky. One of the phrases that I listen for, and one of the phrases as a new supervisor or someone that's taking over a unit that I would listen for, is a phrase that you'll probably hear 1,000 times. well, that's the way we've always done it.
Oh,
And to me, that phrase is never a good reason for doing anything.
agreed.
I mean, it might be the way we've always done it might be the optimal way to do it. But when that's the only solution, and I try to encourage people to start asking why, let's question everything. I'm amazed at how often I go into to an environment and someone will blame, well, it's a law. We have to do that. Well, what's the law? Let's just question everything and find out, because a lot of times you find the way we've always done it is because we're basing what we do on folklore. We're basing
it's so
it on things
true.
that
This really hits home with me since I took over the evidence unit. There was a lot of like, oh, we do these things because that's what the state statute says. And then when I read the state statute, I was like, yeah, that's not in the state statutes. So it was like some ingrained thing that they had been following for years, that they heard from a person who heard from a person, and it was never really checked into. So that's a huge one.
And all this stuff, I mean, these things happen because we work in an environment both in forensics and in evidence management. These are ill-structured problems. I mean, everything that we come up against, everything that we deal with, typically the stuff that gets confusing is because it's an ill-structured problem. There's no predetermined, preset solution. Mm-hmm. So we work with the systems that we know. We work with, for crime scene investigators, we work with the body of law that we're aware of. We work with the availability of techniques and processes that we've been trained on.
Yeah.
But what happens a lot of times is no one is investigating new possibilities. No one is investigating the actual text of the body of law that we're referencing, or how that law is applied. There's just so much that just goes down to folklore, and it's a horrible way of living.
So true. So true. So you already kind of mentioned some of these things, but if you're trying to build a really great unit culture, what are some of the key things that you need to do, or I don't want to use the word enforce, but kind of, expectations to set for your team, or things like that, that will really develop your unit into a team that has a great culture?
Well, it's like you said at the beginning. I mean, every team, every unit, every department, every agency, I guess I could go out and list all the other organization verbs, or not
all the things.
I won't. But, culture comes down to really about 5 different things, I think. And again, number one is relationships. Culture is an aggregation of a bunch of different human interactions and beliefs and hopes and desires and dreams, and then reality kind of juxtaposed. So it's all about relationships. It begins and ends with the relationships that you have in the unit. And, that's a pretty complex part, but, there are a couple of factors like mission. It boils down to relationships and then mission. What is it that you're supposed to be doing? What are you supposed to accomplish? What is this? Why did this group come together? Mm-hmm. And do we have all the right seats on the bus? And do we all understand what we're trying to accomplish? Mm-hmm. And these might seem like oversimplifications, but really, you really have to boil things down. If you want to assess culture, you got to be able to dissect culture. And relationships would be one, mission would be another. Leadership for me is huge, but not in the traditional sense of the word. Leadership is not something that begins at the top and ends at the top. Leadership behaviors throughout the entire ranks of the team. If leadership is a value, then leadership is present in people's decision making. They take ownership. They take pride in their work. They know that they're being supported, that they know that they're being led in a manner that, to me, I love collaborative processes. And the only way collaborative processes are successful is if you have leadership that's supportive and truly believes in collaboration. If you've got a top-down kind of autocratic leader who knows that the buzzword I'm supposed to be using here with the team is collaboration, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
You have to actually believe this stuff. When you look at culture, you got to look at actual values versus our claimed values. We've all got our mission statement up on the wall. We've got our core beliefs and core values written nicely in a little page in our binder, or sometimes we even have it on a pretty little wall, painted up somewhere. Sometimes it's on the side of our vehicles. But if that doesn't reflect what you're actually about and what your unit is actually about, then those are worthless, you know? So we have to really look at what do we actually value here. We say that we value service to the community, but if we really value writing citations more, we really have to get down and figure out what it is that we value. And it's okay to take a look at the claimed values, you know, the list that we hold out that are public facing, and we say, yeah, this is what we're about. Question it. Are we really about those things? Because if we're really about the values that we say we're about, it's going to be lived out through the way that we interact with each other, the way we interact with our stakeholders, the way we interact with the people that we come in contact with. It's going to be obvious. So for me, kind of just doing a little checklist, you know, we say that we're about, you know, service to the public, but if we're really crappy at that and we really don't care about them at all, and they annoy us and we feel like they're an imposition, then that's really not a value that we actually have. For me, the last thing I look at is just organizational health. It is really difficult to have a great culture if your entire organization is just a toxic place to work. If you're under-resourced, I mean, I think a lot of times leaders try to use culture and they try to use leadership to fix problems that culture and leadership don't fix. Like, we want to do more with less. A city manager from the place I retired from, ex-city manager, loved that phrase. We do more with less. And I always thought that is just probably the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Because he's trying to convince me.
I think
he wants me to do more things with fewer things.
yes.
And I mean,
I think a lot of agencies have adopted that motto.
Yeah, they love it,
Yeah.
and it sounds so positive. It's a great way to say we're broke and we can't buy stuff, and we can't pay you to do the job that you're supposed to do.
Yes.
You know, we'll just stop saying that. You know, that is really to me, it's it, because what happens is that type of thinking kind of seeps into your organization. And, you know, do we want to save money? Absolutely. Do we want to be wise and judicious with our resources?
Of
Absolutely.
course, yeah.
Do we want to waste? No, not. But you can't just manufacture things from thin air. You know, it's like an unfunded mandate. Nobody loves those. But if you're not supported as an organization, if you're not appropriately staffed or appropriately resourced, let's say you have a job that would require 10 people to do well or efficiently or effectively, and you've hired 3. But we're just going to do more with less. I mean, the math at some point begins to break down.
Yeah.
And we're not able to accomplish more with less, even though we're tasked with it. That becomes really quickly an incredibly toxic place to work.
Yeah.
Because you hear this mantra, and then you never hear less of that. You know,
Yep.
It's always more. So
That is
the
so
health of the
true.
organization, our actual values, leadership, the mission and relationships. I think those are the things that are the building blocks of culture.
So then how many of those things can the leaders and the supervisors that are here truly control and impact to help build a better culture on their team? Do you feel like there's some of those that the leaders have a more direct impact over than others?
You know, I don't want to seem simplistic, but I believe that you can absolutely impact all of them. I mean, even the resources, even the organizational health aspects.
Yes.
You absolutely have the ability to impact that in some way, shape, or form. It's not something I wrote down in my little notes, but, you know, especially with the things that aren't our normal purview, those are excellent opportunities for changing the culture. You know, learning to speak the language of executive level leadership is huge.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we might not feel trained or empowered or staffed to, or, you know, positioned within the organization to make those kind of big picture organizational health decisions, but we can absolutely influence them. And in the way that we carry ourselves and the problems and the way we bring them to the table, we can absolutely impact almost every element of an organization by tackling culture.
Yes.
So leadership and culture, it's an active thing. It's a verb. It's something that you do. And if it's not something that you're intentional about, if it's not something that you're working on a daily basis, then the problem is you. I mean, you're the reason at some point when you take over in a management or a supervisory position, and let's say you inherit a toxic culture, 6 months in, 12 months in, I'm not sure when that is, but at some point now you're the problem. If that same culture still exists 6 months from now and you just get absorbed by the Borg, then you're the problem. And we need somebody else other than you, because you haven't done anything. You've just kind of been lulled into this stupor that everyone else was lulled in. We need to change at that position. I think it's a real tendency to come in. A lot of people, they have these false beliefs. Culture change requires work, and it requires a lot of human interaction and a lot of human work. And most of us aren't willing to do that kind of work because it's not what we signed on. If you're a lab manager at a forensic lab, the disciplines that you studied in your education have nothing to do with human interactions. If you're a street cop or a police officer, we don't take a lot of those types of classes. But ultimately, that's where we fail. I mean, we're all pretty good at our disciplines. We're all pretty good at the things that we're experts at.
Yep.
And it's the human element. And I think a lot of people, when they come into a new position and they want to change the culture, literally what they do is, I'm going to buy some motivational posters and I'm going to put those up on the wall.
You mean that doesn't work?
And you're going to see that. And or little gimmicks, like casual Thursday or casual Friday. And I'm fortunate. I work in an environment where literally I have shorts on right now, and I can come to work on casual Monday. This was filmed earlier. But that doesn't change anything. And then you'll see that, well, maybe if I just read some more books. It's not about reading books. It's not about, things I put on the wall. It's really, what do you do? How do you interact with people? It's listening to people. And one of the things that I think a new leader could benefit from, but you have to be really careful, is learning more about yourself and learning more about other people.
Yeah.
Two things that I would suggest to any new supervisor, any old supervisor. I mean, I didn't learn this stuff overnight either. But take some personality tests. There are a couple, they're free. And are they scientific? No. Forensic people, they might not be, Minnesota metaphysics that you have to pay a bunch of money for. Let's just start with the low-hanging fruit. The 16personalities.com test. It's free. And it's based on a pretty tried and true Myers-Briggs type test, and an Enneagram, which is another type of personality test. But for me, I believed before I started any self-reflection and self-awareness that everyone in the world thought like I did. And it was so frustrating when everyone in the world thought differently from me, that everyone else is an idiot and I know everything. Learning that people think differently and value things differently helped me a ton.
Yeah. And I think as a supervisor, you constantly have to deal with people coming to you because they have made assumptions or misconstrued something somebody said, when their brain functions completely differently. Their two brains function completely differently.
Yep.
It's a constant battle as a supervisor.
Any work group that I work with for any length of time, I either force everyone to take an Enneagram or a 16 personalities test, because I need to know about me. They need to know about me. I need to know about them. So how do I approach this person? Because I'm typically very direct and confrontational. Like I love conflict. It's fun for me. It warms me. A lot of people don't. They don't like conflict. And when you are direct and forceful with someone that doesn't receive that well, it stifles that person's ability to function with you. So just learning that stuff and learning to listen actively. I was a negotiator for a number of years, and this was a great discipline for negotiation, very effective for negotiations, but just active listening to people and listening to them in a way where you actually hear them, where they actually get to express a complete thought. And you take that thought and you don't interrupt it, you don't turn it on its ear and then turn it into something you want to talk about. You actually listen.
Yeah.
Listening sucks. It's awful, but it is absolutely critical if you want to change the culture within an organization. You have to listen to people.
It's so true.
You have to value people. So,
and I think I think on the same kind of path as that, I became more successful as a supervisor as I learned to communicate more effectively the needs of my unit with my chain of command, like you were talking about earlier. And that also came down to people and learning who I was talking to and learning the appropriate ways to broach certain topics and ask for certain things. And when I got better at that, my unit started getting more resources, which was more helpful for them. So we see a lot of supervisors that are, going up against that wall where they're like, my department won't give me people, they won't give me funding, they won't give me the equipment that I need. And again, it comes down to those relationships and understanding who you're communicating with and the best way to deliver that information and all of that, I think has been very helpful too.
Yeah, I think for many of us in law enforcement and in forensic disciplines or in the area that I work in with evidence vaults, there's a huge tendency to have this external locus of control. Like where I believe that they won't give me this stuff. They won't give me more people. They won't give me they won't do this. Who in the hell is they? I mean, they is just you 5 years from now when you get into their position. So
that's true.
The thing that I try to get people to think about is, we're always waiting on them for change. Well, they ain't coming. They aren't. They don't know what you need.
Yeah.
Especially when we bring them complaints instead of bring them solutions. Mm-hmm. We need to be more about the business of bringing executive level leaders. Let's bring them solutions. I need to be able to communicate to them to where they understand, they speak in liability and math. We need to have measurable problems to bring them in order to solve, because they don't think or speak in any other terms. But when we have this kind of tendency to believe that, well, it's upper level management, it's the chief's fault, it's the director's fault, that kind of creates this learned helplessness where then we're just operating as noble martyrs and, well, we're just going to keep on doing this even though we don't have what we need. And that creates a defeated kind of culture after a while.
Yeah.
And we got to realize that they ain't changing unless we give them a sufficient reason and opportunity to change. They're not thinking about these problems. They don't understand what's wrong and they don't know how to fix it. So we have to be, as leaders, we have to be able to communicate these things up the chain, speak in that language that executive level leaders understand, so that our complaints and our concerns turn into actions. We might not be able to fix it this year, but by having a longitudinal approach, if we think like in a business plan, a 5-year plan, and we approach them, well, this has to be fixed now. It's not going to be fixed now. But if we have a long-term approach and develop our own kind of like a 5-year business plan, these are things that I would like to see added in the budget in fiscal year 2024 and make these things work, I think you'll see more change. But we have this tendency to demand like little children, and no one responds well to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you said that it's all about math and liability because really, that is what I've had to learn over the years, is that if I need something, if my unit needs something, I have to let them know why the agency, what liabilities would there be if we didn't provide this thing for the agency, what liabilities would the agency have? And I've always had to back things up with substantial stats. And we know that there's, plenty of supervisors out there that are not even tracking stats for their staff. And I know this is kind of off topic for the unit culture, but like such an important thing to do. Yeah.
Because Because part of culture, I mean, if you're a supervisor, if you're a leader, I mean, and I have a very simplistic view of supervision and management. You know, if I'm the leader, if I'm the manager, it's my job to trust you to do what you're supposed to do and to equip you to do what you're supposed to do. So really, in my world, my job is one, hold you accountable for making sure that we're successful, and two, get you the stuff that you need. And in order to do that, I also have to understand, who do I communicate these needs to upstream? And if I understand that my job is to get you what you need, in order to get you what you need, I have to learn how to speak the language of executive level leadership. Then I've got to frame this in mathematical terms. This has to be a measurable, solvable problem that the resources that I'm asking for will specifically address. And if you learn that early on, it makes things so much easier. My favorite language to speak to executive level leaders is liability. You know, this is the consequence of action. If you don't do this, this is the consequence. Chief, you get to make the decision, but you need to know that if you don't, we'll be an unaccredited lab. We won't, you know,
Yes.
or we'll,
Absolutely.
or we would lose every case that we have based on chain of custody alone.
Yeah.
You know, these are simple things.
I heard you.
They resonate.
I heard you say that at one of the conferences, and it's really true. I mean, I've taken that approach. Even with our forensic units, being like, hey, you know, if we don't have this thing, then we lose cases as a department. Like, cases don't get prosecuted. And that is a very big red flag, as opposed to just saying, like, I need this thing. So, yes, those are huge.
And I think we've been fortunate as an industry in both forensics and in evidence management. And honestly, if you look where we're at now, they both evolved significantly over the past 10 to 15 years. I mean, 30, 45 years ago, a lot of the forensic disciplines that were being practiced out there, kind of like witchcraft now. We don't do those things anymore because we've learned better.
Right.
And same thing with evidence. You know, we've learned better ways to do things. We've learned, you know, that the scientific method matters, and that we have certain processes and accreditations that mean something, you know. So we're learning, but we're also working in an environment that hasn't quite caught up to that yet. So I think it's definitely possible.
I love it. So the last thing I have for you is, for those supervisors that have either inherited a toxic culture or are not a fan of the culture that they currently have, what steps do you think that they could take first to start kind of correcting that and getting the unit on the right path?
I think number one would be, make sure that you're the person that can do it. You know, you have to do a little bit of a self-assessment when you walk in. And I think that anybody is capable of that, but you got to make sure that you want to do it. And you have to be able to at least have the desire to build those relationships. You know, if you want, if your gut tells you, I want to decree change by fiat, then you can pretty much guarantee not only is the culture not going to get better, it's going to get worse under your supervision or under your management. So the very first thing you can do is start talking to people, and not, you know, we don't have to lead with, hey, what are the problems here? Get to know their names, get to know what they do, understand how they contribute to your organization. This might seem incredibly small, and it is, but you got to start small. You have to understand the existing culture before you can even begin to move the mark on changing that culture and moving it in a different direction. And these cultures didn't happen overnight. I mean, most of these are accretion cultures where just things just happen. Cultures of neglect, which is probably a stronger culture than an actively created, you know, rah, let's go team culture, because that stuff is hard to overcome. But I would start small, you know, after we've kind of learned the people and learned the history and learned the actual culture and begun to put some definition to it, start somewhere small, you know, just start with one little thing. And if you've got a big picture at the end, I mean, you kind of need to know what that's like. What do you want that culture to be? What are your actual values? I mean, I think earlier I mentioned that there were 5 tips: mission, actual values, organizational health. If you can create a microcosm that kind of defines those things for this little work group, and then live that out, that's when culture change can happen. If you're not prepared to live it out, if they're not prepared to make it part of your DNA, then it's all you're left with is motivational posters and fun leadership books. And those will give you
not
about
gonna work.
15 minutes. It's not going to work. And one thing I like to keep in mind, because for me, the two things that are huge for me that don't come natural to me at all. I mean, I was a cop for a long time. We complained about everything. I mean, just for sport, even when there's nothing really to complain about. But there's two kind of concepts that I try to practice that help me get better with me, and then that can leach out. Is I try to practice an attitude of gratitude. And this might seem overly simplistic and very Pollyanna-ish and silly, but I promise you, if you can bring an attitude of gratitude in with you to begin the day, sure, you might get defeated. It might be chopped out from under you in minutes. But honestly, approaching things from that perspective, from a posture of humility and appreciation, rather than, oh, the world is against me, everything is terrible, I'm never going to win. Well, you're right. Things can't always get better, but they can always get worse. So let's just do what we can to start improving things. And then words of encouragement. I'm horrible about that, but it takes literally, I mean, there are human development, like child development studies. One discouraging word, it takes 20 positive reinforcers to erase the effects of that one discouraging word in your brain pan. Mm-hmm. And every time as a leader, I'm very cautious about the discouragement that I provide my people, because I'm good at it. But you have to understand that's huge, So if that becomes our focus, and most of what I say is just repeating out loud the things that are wrong, the things that are broken, the things that aren't going to change, then I'm just like a clanging cymbal. No one's going to hear me after a while, and when they do, it's going to be hard to hear. Mm-hmm. So, and the last thing I'd be prepared to fail. It's okay to fail. Let's just keep failing forward, but learn from our mistakes and keep trying. There's a Theodore Roosevelt quote that I love, and I don't remember it. It's really good. You look it up on your own. But basically, it's, just jump in the arena, Just because you get beaten down a little bit, if you're not beaten down a little bit, if you haven't tasted a little bit of failure and learned from your mistakes, there's zero chance that you're going to learn from that. True. So don't be afraid to fail.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, whether you want it to or not. Even if you read the books and have all the posters, it's going to fail.
It's so true. So true. I think, unfortunately, many of us as supervisors learned we learned how to do our jobs by jumping in there and making the mistakes. And then someone was like, oh, you can't do that. And you're like, okay, I'll make a note of that. I didn't know. So, yes, You got to get in there and play the game for sure. That was awesome. Thank you for all those nuggets. So before we hop off for the day, where can our supervisors that are here attending, where can they reach you? Tell us about your company. What kind of courses can they find there and all of that?
Well, if you want to learn more about what we do, that's our website, evidencemanagement.com. But look us up. Look at our website. We do training classes. We try to do them coast to coast. We try to teach police departments how to properly run an evidence room. And we do consulting and auditing work. Our goal is to actually help people fix their own problems, because we can't be everywhere. We do have a lot of resources on our website that are free and available to the public that I would encourage you to look at, especially if you run an evidence vault. If you're a crime lab, probably not so much. But I will say it's not a bad idea if you run a crime lab to store and house the evidence that you store and collect and analyze appropriately. And we could help you learn some of those things as well. Look at the website, give us a call, be happy to talk to anybody. If I've thoroughly confused you, I apologize. But it was fun being here. Aaron, it's good to meet you in Florida. And we'll definitely come to Florida.
Absolutely. So we would love to have you in Florida. So Thank you guys so much for attending this session. We hope you enjoy the rest of the summit.
All right, we hope you enjoyed this bonus episode of the Forensics Unfiltered podcast. Just a reminder, if you want instant access to this guest interview and over 30 more presentations like it, get the All Access Pass at gapscience.teachable.com. The link is waiting for you in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here and listening to Forensics Unfiltered. If you liked this episode, would you do us a favor and leave a review letting us know specifically what you liked about this topic? It will only take a minute, but it will really help us plan future episodes so we can bring you more topics that you want to listen to. We'll be sure to provide any links from today's episode in our show notes on our website. Head to www.gapscience.com. Until next time, stay safe out there.